Have you ever watched one of those films where you're eating dinner and then you're eating dinner very quickly because of how tense the film is? This is one of those films that's probably going to give you indigestion while watching if you're eating any sort of food, because you're going to be going. All Quiet on the Western Front follows teenagers Paul Boehmer and his friends Albert and Muller, who voluntarily enlist in the German army, riding a wave of patriotic fever that quickly dissipates once they face the brutal realities of life on the front. We've seen this time again shown in war films, where you see youngsters getting excited about wanting to jump in the army and do their patriotic duty, and they get there and then they're confronted with the realism of war and what that means, and very quickly they lose their joy as they start losing their friends. This film is a showcase in the most spectacular way, in the most visual, vibrant, as in grotesque, horrible scenes that you're going to watch. That is a stark reality as to what World War I was like. And there's some interesting facts that you'll learn at the end of the movie, make you think like, how much do I know actually about World War I? 17 million people died in World War I. That's a big number, and it's hard for you to relate to any of that because it's such a big number. But when you see the visual storylines of certain people that were there, or certain stories that were represented like this, you start understanding exactly how traumatic it was. A big part of this film is showcase the trench warfare, and we see tanks being used, flamethrowers, aeroplanes, how one-sided the military is on this particular battlefield, and how these youngsters from, very, very young teens know nothing about war, little to no training, and they are confronted with having to kill another person. Get to see how they eat, how they gather their weapon, keeping your weapon clean. It is so real and in your face that you will often want to look away, gripping, where you just kind of grips you by the throat and then doesn't let go. It is that film. It's not a happy film, and you wouldn't expect it to be. So if you're going in this thinking it's some sort of like heroic adventure, it's not that. Of the war that they had to live through, and it's a very real look at that. Now the cinematography, of course, everybody's going to say, yeah, it looks beautiful, but the way it's used to showcase the viciousness of the war, the brutality of the war. You have amazing wide vista shots of the trenches, the battlefield, of the men running across the field, them getting blown to smithereens. It's really quite stark and beautiful to look at. People appear mini, and in contrast, we'll go and zoom in and really be close on the face of a young man who has just had to kill someone, with mud caked all over his face, blood dripping down his nose, a tooth missing, wounded heavily. And so you go from, wow, that is quite stark and beautiful. And while these young men are giving up their lives, there is a separate story of people, that the people in power trying to meet and stop the war, to stop millions of people dying. And it's so frustrating to see how long they take, the decadence of the lives that they live compared to, trying to drink water that is going to be bad for you. The individual infantrymen who are just running into the line of fire and hoping that their luck holds out that day. The contrast of that, the livelihoods, the different of classes, depending on what your ranking is, hard to watch. It is a German film, and there are subtitles. I think it was like 5 minutes before I forgot I was reading. That tense pretty much throughout. Once that starts and kicks in and they are confronted with the harrowing nature of the war itself, you are locked in with them. So you get to experience the war with these three guys, and you're along for their joys, that those little moments that they find in between the battles, the really great character building, and then you're there for the people that they see die and the people that they have to kill, and how that takes a toll on their psyche. So well done that you get the emotion, you get what they're feeling. The score is a thing on its own. There are these deep tones that don't have any right being in the film. Actually, that doesn't make sense to the time it's been there. It doesn't make sense to the editing. It doesn't make sense to the composer who decided to put it in there, yet it works so well. These tones, deep noises, the is, I'm not doing it justice, but that's the best way I can describe it, and just adds this presence that'll probably put the hairs on the back of your neck to stand up on end, and you'll be like, what is that? Why is that there? But somehow it just elevates the mood and tone of what they were going for, the deep sadness of what these men are experiencing. Even the uniforms get a storyline in this, because it kind of showcase what happens to each infantryman. You see what happens to the uniform getting clean, getting sent on to the next person, still having that name tag, death kind of being with them the whole time as the cycle of death continues. That is harrowing. Some of our characters who walk in with this uniform and later are having to tighten their belts so much because they've lost so much weight, because they've basically eaten nothing, they're starving, they're having to steal for food. It's a very realistic look. Not a happy film, but brilliant to watch. Does that make sense? I kind of hope people do give this a chance. I know it's at select cinemas here in the UK right now. It's coming out next week, I believe, on Netflix. I'm gonna give this a solid 4 Nicolas Cages out of 5.
Ahoy there!
Let me know your thoughts down below. Thanks so much for watching, but most of all, until next time, remember, live long and Tuesday.